Hey everyone, this is a collection video I've been really excited to actually talk about just because, I mentioned it briefly in my Switch collection video that The Legend of Zelda was one of my favorite franchises. I really like fantasy games, as you can tell, especially when they are like either world driven or narrative driven. Some of these games are more narrative driven, some of them are more focused on like building a world. But regardless of what they choose to focus on, I feel like they do push the gaming genre forward. Like every installment of the Zelda series has kind of done something to benefit gaming as a whole. For me, that the cool thing about Zelda, and in particular Final Fantasy as well, is that I feel like they're usually trying to reinvent themselves or add at least another layer to whatever gameplay style or narrative style they're trying to go for. This is going to be a very fun one for me to do because I'm such a big fan of the series. It really means a lot to me. In fact, one of these games is a top 3 favorite game of all time for me, so it's going to be fun to get into that. For this collection video, I'm definitely going to be starting with the game collection because I'll be honest with you, I don't have every single Zelda game, and honestly there's not that much. There's not that many Zelda games. In fact, Zelda's notorious for having like 5 to 7 year development time in between each mainline game, I should say, and then there are like some side games that come in between, but there's significantly less games to talk about in this collection video. But I will definitely be able to go over some of the other cool stuff in the collection, like the special edition consoles and the figures and all that fun stuff. I feel like the Zelda community actually has like a pretty strong understanding of what is considered a mainline game and a side game, so we'll get into that, but for now, let's go ahead and go into my collection. It's actually going to start on the 3DS. I'm not someone that grew up with Zelda on the NES. I know there are some Zelda collectors that want to have everything for every single console. The first few Zelda games that have came out, I would say Legend of Zelda, Zelda 2, and A Link to the Past. Those I have digitally on my 3DS. Let's go ahead and firstly talk about the original, Legend of Zelda. Personally for me, it is a fun game, definitely not something I would play without a guide. It's just one of those games that, again, when it came out, it changed some parts of the gaming landscape. It really reinvented like adventure games and world games because there was a really big open map to explore and they didn't really tell you much about the story. You just kind of had to like roam around the world and figure it out yourself. So for me, even though I didn't grow up with it, I can see the impact from kind of my brief time with the first Legend of Zelda. It's not a game I've beaten, and I'm not going to pretend that I've beaten the first Legend of Zelda because I haven't. This game must have been phenomenal for a lot of people, and I have a lot of respect for it. So even though the first Zelda game is not even like close to being one of my favorite games, it's one of the games I respect the most out of like almost any game I've ever played. The next Zelda game we're going to talk about on the list is actually a game that I have beaten, the second Legend of Zelda. Now, I didn't beat this for fun because this is a very challenging game, and in fact I would recommend most people not to do this because I was pulling my hair out as a kid playing this. I was just someone that was trying to go through like the Zelda games, and I was always a big fan of Mega Man, so I was already kind of into like hard NES platformers. It inspired me to like give it a shot and try a really hard game and at least say I've beaten one of the really hard games on the NES. Did I want to pull my hair out? Absolutely. It was kind of weird because it was a mix of like a platformer, a Final Fantasy, and Dragon Quest in a weird way. Like, it was a very unique game. It was kind of a weird direction to take the Zelda series right after Zelda 1. And as you can see with the rest of the series, they don't really go back to this format, but it's a very interesting game to actually replay nowadays. It's fun. I really like the challenge in The Legend of Zelda 2. Would I go back to play it again? Not at this age because I'm already stressed out enough in life. I've actually recently found my first few gray hairs, so I'm not trying to get more by just jumping into an old NES game, but I can safely say that I beat it at least once. So the third installment of the mainline series that I do have also digitally is The Legend of Zelda, A Link to the Past. I have beaten the game twice, and I will say it's a fun game. Nothing is really wrong with it. This is still a very fun game, and in a lot of ways it's known as like a classic, and for some people it's still their favorite Zelda games, and I could see why personally. It's like it almost perfects the original format for Zelda in a lot of ways. There's one game on this list that I do think does it a little bit better, but we'll get into that. But this is actually a really great Zelda game. Now, the next Zelda game I'm going to talk about is actually not a mainline game, but since it is digital and it's right next to this particular Legend of Zelda game, yeah, I want to talk about it now, just to kind of get out of the way. But The Legend of Zelda Oracle of Seasons. This game I really like. I didn't really love it because gameplay wise it's pretty frustrating to switch inventory items as much as you have to, especially in these old Game Boy games, because that was just an issue with just the old Game Boy. It just didn't have enough buttons to do everything. This is still a game that story-wise I really enjoy. There's actually two versions of it. It's Oracle Seasons and Oracle of Ages. One goes through time, one goes through seasons. I haven't played Oracle of Ages personally, but Oracle of Seasons was actually one of my favorite. They do a really cool thing with the mechanic where they actually change the way the world looks based on the season, and that actually brings different environmental factors to the world and actually changes how you navigate around the world based on what season it is. I really enjoy Oracle Seasons. I find it a bit frustrating to play nowadays, especially now that I'm used to having so many buttons on a console and having a better inventory management experience, especially going forward after this point. But I still appreciate the game, and the gameplay mechanics are really fun. Now, the game I talked about earlier that I would say improved on the A Link to the Past format is actually A Link Between Worlds. This game is one of my favorite Zelda games. It's actually in my top 10, or I would even say top 5, really. A Link Between Worlds is the first Zelda game that I've 100%ed in a decent amount of time without a guide. And it's not because it's easy, it could be quite challenging at times, but it's just because there were certain aspects of the game that not only improved upon A Link to the Past in my personal opinion, but also gameplay wise really took advantage of not only the 3D in the 3DS the console was made for, but also took advantage of the world and how you interact with it. So it was one of those things that I really loved about the game. Gameplay wise, it was actually, I think it's still to this day, it's going to be my favorite 2D Zelda title. I consider this to be a mainline game because it is a direct sequel to A Link to the Past. Gameplay wise, phenomenal. The sound design is actually one of the reasons why I was able to 100% the game, because there's this one side quest where you're looking for all these little it's like an octopus creature. I don't want to say it's an Octorok, but it's an octopus creature, and you're helping the octopus find its kids. And the sound design was just so good. As you got closer to a child, the squeaking you would make would get louder, and you'd have to like kind of look for it. Immediately when you get to another part of the map, you can kind of hear it faintly, and as you got closer to it, it would become louder. And it was just fun to get all the items in this one. The story was cool. I feel maybe a little underwhelming sometimes, but I enjoyed it a little bit more than A Link to the Past, especially the ending. I don't know, I love A Link Between Worlds. It's one of my favorite Zelda games, just period. I think it's one of the most overlooked Zelda games. I wouldn't say it's underrated, because a lot of people that have played this love it, but I definitely think it's an overlooked Zelda game, absolutely, because I guess it was on the 3DS and we just wanted Breath of the Wild to come out at the time, and we were just kind of waiting on that. A Link Between Worlds, fantastic game. Now that we're going through the digital collection, I can actually talk about the physical collection and go through kind of the rest of the mainline games and talk about the side games afterwards. So let's go ahead and start that off. So there are times where being irresponsible as a child will definitely screw your life up in the future as an adult. Me in particular, I lost some of the game cases for my GameCube titles that I have. I'm not going to go through N64 titles because if you know my story, I was not allowed to play video games until the Game Boy Advance, GameCube era. I grew up playing the Nintendo 64 and NES and Super Nintendo with my uncle, who was like a big gamer, but I was not allowed to have games until my dad just randomly decided to take me and get me a GameCube behind my mom's back, and eventually she just let it slide and just let me play. The GameCube was really the console where I was able to discover gaming and have a love for it. It's not because it was the console I grew up with per se, but it was just the first home console that was my own. So obviously these games are going to mean a lot to me, and I guess I'm going to talk about the first two Zelda games that I actually got to play, and that would be Ocarina of Time and Wind Waker. Now, Ocarina of Time was one of those games that was given to me by my uncle, the one that I mentioned to you that was very into gaming at the time. And I got the Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time disc for the GameCube. Now this one is not like the collector's one that has Majora's Mask as well. I did have that, and what's really dumb of me is that I actually let my friend switch this out with me as a kid. At the time, I was just like, I just like Ocarina of Time. Majora's Mask is too scary. Now Majora's Mask is one of my favorite Zelda games, and I regret not keeping it, but it is what it is. I still have very fond memories of this version of Ocarina of Time, and honestly, it's been just a joy to play. I mean, especially at the time when it was my first time discovering Zelda. And while Ocarina of Time is not really like my favorite Zelda game, it's actually one that I feel is one of the most important games to the series, to the franchise. And I think that that's a consensus everyone can agree on. It might not be your favorite, you might not like Ocarina of Time, but it's a very important game to not just the Zelda series, but gaming as a whole. It was like a very big landmark. The only other game that can come close to that really, especially at the time, was Final Fantasy VII. So Ocarina of Time is my first Zelda game besides Wind Waker, and I would actually go back and forth between these two. I got my GameCube at Circuit City, and the first two games I got for my GameCube was Super Smash Bros. Melee and Legend of Zelda Wind Waker. And the Wind Waker is to this day my favorite Zelda game. It could be because I have nostalgia for it. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that, hey, this is the best one because it's better than Breath of the Wild, or it's better than some of the other games on this list. That's absolutely not the case. I don't think it's the best. I mean, in a way, I feel like it's the best Zelda story-wise, but I don't think it's the best Zelda game gameplay-wise. I do find it to be a little bit too easy, but the story and the art style and the world really tugs on my heartstrings, and for that reason, it's really my favorite Zelda game. For me, having a game in this art style really appealed to my senses as a child, because I was very into like very different art styles as opposed to like the very anime kind of like realistic art style at the time. And this game like I mentioned in my Switch collection video, and Okami, I feel like are the two games that have aged the most gracefully over any point in gaming, really. And then just mainly just due to that art style that they use. It was phenomenal at the time, and I'm kind of sad to hear a lot of the time that not a lot of people appreciated this title, especially growing up. It's so strange to me because I loved this game growing up. I was actually stuck on the first island for a very long time in my life because as a kid I was scared to go to like the Forsaken woods, but I don't know why. And then at some point I just got over my fears and I went through it and I had a great adventure, and I think that was another reason why I have such nostalgia for it. It's just one of those games that like taught me to get over my fear and like explore the unknown, even if it's scary, because it might be a fun adventure lying ahead of you. As cheesy as that fucking sounds, I know that sounds fucking cheesy, but that's just how I truly feel. I feel like that was just like a big learning journey for me as a person. But yeah, I don't know. Wind Waker. Luckily, these next set of games are games I actually do have the game cases for. The next one on the lineup is Twilight Princess, the GameCube version. Again, I really grew up with the GameCube. I wasn't allowed to have a Wii until like way later down the line. And by the time I got one, I kind of already had this version, and I was very satisfied with it. I love Twilight Princess. It's definitely like my third favorite Zelda game. My third favorite Zelda game for a lot of reasons, just because it was the first time I actually felt like I was going on like a Lord of the Rings kind of like grand adventure. There was so much build up to a lot of moments in this game, and I'm so glad I kept the case for this, because I remember looking through like Nintendo Power and like having a whole manual that you can actually go through on the car ride home. To this day, it's one of those things that like I don't. It's just something about having that feeling where you get a game case and you have the manual, and even though it just sits in the box the whole time, it's just something about that going through it as an adult, and it's just a lot of nostalgia hits you. I love a lot of aspects of Twilight Princess as well. I didn't get to finish it though until I was like maybe 14-15 years old, like way later down the road. That was just due to the fact that I got really far in this game and just never got a chance to beat it. I was going through some like childhood trauma at the time with like my parents and like moving and everything, so I couldn't really sit down to play this at the time, but I remember always wanting to, and when I finally beat it when I was 15, it meant a lot to me. I can go on and on about like my favorite aspects about it, whether it's actually Link, and even to some extent the Wolf Link sections were kind of fun to me as a kid. Midna, the best companion, bar none. There's never been a better Zelda companion than Midna. To this day, she just has the most personality and character growth. And to this day, the final battle is still, I think, my favorite in like the Zelda series. It's just so well done, so much time built up to it. I like the ending a lot. It's not my personal favorite ending, but it's a solid ending with very little loose threads. Twilight Princess, everybody. Twilight Princess, I love you. Now, The Legend of Zelda Four Swords Adventures. This is a game that I actually really like as well. I remember vividly my dad coming home from Best Buy just saying, hey, I know you like Zelda. Here you go. Here's another Zelda game. And this one is seriously like one of the funnest Zelda games I've ever played. It's a very cute game, very fun game, I think, but honestly, it kind of falls apart some points throughout the adventure because it just becomes a little frustrating trying to navigate the world. And a lot of the times, I actually found it a little bit easier to play using just the formation in single player. Reason being is because even though you can have a lot of fun with other people, it can also be kind of frustrating if you don't communicate with each other well. This was still a very fun game. The graphic style was actually very cute, and it was like a very nice version to see in a television at the time. The Legend of Zelda The Minish Cap. This game is so insanely hard to get now, and I'm so sorry if you don't have like a Wii U or something where you can buy this digitally, because this is seriously one of the most fun Zelda games you can play on the Game Boy Advance. Again, there's frustrating aspects because the Game Boy Advance only had so many buttons, so there was definitely more item switching than I would have liked. But I had a very good time with this game. I actually have very fond memories of like enjoying the story, enjoying like some build up between Link and Zelda that you didn't really get a chance to see. In this one, they're actually childhood friends, and I don't know if that's the first time they've ever done that in the series. You guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it was. I think it's the first time that Zelda and Link were just childhood friends and just talked to each other, and that was really cool. It made Zelda feel like a more important part of the story, and when she actually eventually gets kidnapped, she is on it's a little bit more impactful than say like Ocarina of Time, where it happens so late and you've kind of only barely known Zelda. I think it's a very cute, fun game to go through. It actually explores the the origin of Link's hat, which is kind of crazy to think about. In a lot of ways, it doesn't really hold up well with the rest of the series. I kind of forgot to mention this. I do have a physical copy of A Link Between Worlds. I already talked about this game in depth, but I liked it so much that I got digitally and physically. Now, the remake of Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time is phenomenal. It's the Ocarina of Time that you know, but with a lot more conveniences and much better graphics, like something that's actually going to age really well. It's almost as apparent as the Final Fantasy VIII original Squall and the Final Fantasy VIII remastered Squall. These just feel more true to life to like the original art that was created for this game. And this is a fantastic version as well. This is the best, the definitive version of Ocarina of Time that you can play. I wouldn't even recommend that new, Switch version that they have. I would just recommend if you have a 3DS, which is honestly still kind of easy to get, but getting harder day by day. So if you don't have a 3DS, try to get one. But if you have a 3DS, let this be one of the first games that you get for it, especially since the eShop is closing soon for the 3DS and Wii U. So many things I need to get. Next game on the list, Majora's Mask for the Nintendo 3DS. What an adventure. This was my first time actually completing Majora's Mask. I had such a hard time playing through Majora's Mask as a kid. It was one of those games that just freaked me out a little bit too much. I wish I just went through it as a kid. I wish I had just like the balls to go through Majora's Mask, the original version, because there are some people that really prefer that original version of Majora's Mask over this 3DS version. For me personally though, the graphics and some of the improvements they've made upon this version is worth it to me. And even though I can see like you know, story-wise, how some people could feel like the original is better. I think if I were to replay Majora's Mask, I would still go to this. There are moments where I got emotional, almost cried. It's not as story-driven as, say, something like you know, Twilight Princess or Wind Waker. The reason why it's my second favorite is because there's a lot of little stories that I care about. It feels more like an anthology adventure in a weird way, and it somehow still brings everything together at the end. And there's a lot of cool things here. The world building is fantastic. Majora's Mask, one of my favorite games of all time. Just one of my, you know, it's my second favorite Zelda game for a reason. And I really do recommend this 3DS version. I know there's going to be some people that tell you just play the original because it's going to make you feel more stressed. I don't want to feel more stressed as an adult, to be honest with you. I'm not saying this game is easy by any means, but I'm also not trying to stress myself out. Some people really like Dark Souls and hard games, and that's fine. I enjoy Dark Souls too if I'm in a certain mood, but when I play Zelda games, I really do it for like, I think everyone plays them for different reasons. For me, it's like world building and story, having a fulfilling adventure, and to me, like the challenge is not like on the top of the list for my favorite things in Zelda games, but I don't know. Majora's Mask means a lot to me, genuinely. I'm going to talk about these two games together really quick because they are on the DS, and that's going to be Phantom Hourglass and Spirit Tracks. So these games are actually sequels to The Wind Waker, which is my favorite Zelda game. Now, they don't exactly go through like the Wind Waker format with sailing and having Ganondorf and, you know, trying to save the world again and everything like that, but I feel like these games might be worth trying. I'm still not sure how I feel about moving around with like the stylus all the time, and I feel like as time goes on, these games become harder to play because you get so used to like good controls on other Zelda games. And again, it's one of those games that, again, I mentioned in the beginning of this video, the Zelda series experiments a lot. These are two of those experiments. It's hard for me to get back into this, maybe at some point in the future. I don't see that happening anytime soon, because again, I have a few other games on my list that I'm trying to play through first, so it's something I'm gonna get to, just probably not anytime soon, but if you want to hear my thoughts about it when I finish it, I'll let you know. Legend of Zelda Wind Waker HD. Honestly, this is the definitive version of the Wind Waker for me, and this version in particular is my third favorite video game of all time. If you guys don't know, my first is Chrono Trigger, then it's Final Fantasy IX, and then it's The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker HD for the Wii U. I love this game. I even have the collector's edition for it, and I will go through that. The collector's edition came with a digital copy of it, but I just wanted a physical copy of this game because it means so much to me, and it was worth it for me to just have two versions of the game, one that's on my Wii U at all times and one that's physical, just in case something happens to my Wii U. I can always try to get another Wii U down the line and just pick this game up. Unfortunately, they haven't remade this, or they haven't re-released it on the Switch. I really wish they did, because if they did, I would buy like 2 copies of it again, like digital and physical, because I love it that much. I want it with me all the time, even though it's not too different. It's like the Ocarina of Time for 3DS. It's not too different from the original, but the things that made the game easier to play really change your gameplay experience. At least moves this version up by like a point or two. If you really want to let the art style get to you, I get it in a way, but even though I prefer the art style in that original in some ways, I don't mind the clay look in this, and I really love this version of the game. I feel like some of the lighting in this is phenomenal, actually. So yeah, if you have a way to get this title and get a Wii U at this point, then I would try to, especially if you can get one at a reasonable price. But these are getting so hard to find, but I love it. Now, I was wondering if I should actually show you this, but since I just talked about Wind Waker HD, I guess I should talk about this collector's edition of Twilight Princess. This one comes with an amiibo of Midna and Wolf Link. I still haven't opened it, really, because I don't want to yet. I just love it in the box. I don't know why. It's like one of those collector's things that, like, once it's opened, you know that the value is lost, and even though I know I'm never going to get rid of this and I want to enjoy it, at the same time, there's just something about me that just doesn't want to open it until like I really am curious about like that extra dungeon that you unlock by using the amiibo. This game is, you know, it's actually the most faithful, I would say. They didn't really change the art style at all for this one. All they did was really like just HD it up. They did change the faces of some characters, and they kind of look weird, but I can get over that very easily because the gameplay is a lot more fun because, again, convenience. And that's something that's going to be, I guess, a staple with like Zelda remakes. Is just if they're going to remake it, they're going to just mainly focus on stuff that was inconvenient in the original and try to make them convenient in the remake. I should have mentioned this when I talked about Twilight Princess, the original version, but when they brought it for Wii, they realized that Link was left-handed, most people were right-handed. So what they did was they actually flipped everything, like the entire game, so that way you can use the Wii remote with your right hand because you had to swing physically in that version. I don't mind that because that's the way I originally played it anyways. So, I mean, I love this game and I've already talked about it to death. I love this collector's edition. It's actually one of my favorites, so yeah. Now we get to actually talk about Skyward Sword. This is a game I'm actually currently going through. Not this Wii version. I do have this Wii version with the golden Wii remote. And I guess I never really got a chance to try it. I actually mentioned as well I was going through like that period in my life where I had some childhood trauma going on that I'm not going to disclose in this video. But this also came with the Wii Remote soundtrack and the game. And because of that, I actually feel like this is still a very solid version, especially if you are into the motion controls. I'll actually say this, if you like the motion controls in this game, get the Wii version and play that, because the Switch motion controls I feel like don't work as well as this Wii Remote. As of now, I don't see myself going back to this because playing it on the Switch is just so much easier for me, especially because the Switch is portable and everything like that, and as an adult going to work and everything, playing it at work is just a dream. So it's kind of hard for me to like plug in my Wii or even my Wii U to like kind of just play this. I still enjoy this game, and I'm still enjoying it. I'll let you know my thoughts on it when I beat it. I'm thinking about actually doing this thing where every time I beat a game, I take time to talk about my thoughts on it. Not in like a retrospective format, but just kind of like a book club format where like I kind of just talk to you about like my experience and what I thought about it in like a, you know, face-to-face kind of way. Let me know what you guys think about that. So this is the version of Breath of the Wild that I personally have physically. I do have a version on Switch that is digital, just so I can have it anywhere I want, but the version I played at the time, because I couldn't afford a Switch at the time, was Breath of the Wild on Wii U, because I was one of the like 5 people in the world that had a Wii U apparently. For some reason, just playing on the Wii U felt right, because it was like the version they intended for most people to play, I guess, in a lot of ways. So, I mean, I don't know if maybe the Wii U version held the Switch version back, graphics wise or something, but I really enjoyed the Wii U version of this game. Wish they took advantage of the Nintendo gamepad more, because I don't know, there was just the way they actually tried to implement it was kind of weird. It didn't really like show the map on the screen like it would in other Zelda games, and didn't really take advantage of that. It was a little bit disappointing. In a lot of ways, I feel like that was a lazy way to do it, because the Switch version came out, and I guess they didn't want this version to have some conveniences that the Switch version didn't. I find that to be a little disappointing and honestly kind of unfair, because I feel like if they implemented those versions, that this version would be the definitive version. It is what it is. I still had a great time with this game. Story-wise, though, out of the 3D Zelda, I think it's the weakest for me. And that's why, even though this is a lot of people's favorite Zelda game, it's not mine. I don't love the story in this, but I do love the gameplay and exploration. Exploring this game was like three-fourths of the fun. Just exploring and fighting and just the challenge of it, and just learning new things about the world that didn't need like, you know, exposition thrown at you. But the story itself, for someone that grew up with Zelda and really like prefers games with like a narrative focus. Not everyone does. Some people just prefer to have better gameplay, but I do prefer games that have great gameplay and narrative focus. It's hard for me to play a game with a very bad narrative. I'm not going to say this is a bad narrative, because the narrative's okay. It's just, I think, the weakest of the 3D Zeldas. It may be better than like the Legend of Zelda narrative and A Link to the Past narrative, but that's, you know, like the first 3 Zelda games, but that's not saying much, because those hardly have any plot, and I feel like this has that same issue. You know, the story in this game didn't hold up to my expectations, but the gameplay certainly was exceeded. And in the exploration, and just learning about the world and everything was the best part about Breath of the Wild, and it's still a game I love to this day. It is like in the top 5 favorite Zeldas for me, so it's not like in the bottom 10 or something. It's a great Zelda game, and I would say if I had to put it in my top 5, it'd probably be number 4 for gameplay alone. Story wise, and just the way that the story connected with the world didn't really fit with me, so it is what it is. But I still love this game. I'm not saying, I just don't love it as much as other people, I guess. I mentioned this earlier, it's Skyward Sword HD for the Nintendo Switch. I recently bought this. I think I talked about it vaguely on my Nintendo Switch collection video, but I'm playing through this version right now. This is the game I'm currently trying to go through, and it's fun. I'm really enjoying my time with it, but the thing is, I don't know, to be perfectly honest with you, I'm just really pushing through it because unfortunately, I know what happens in the story. Because my friends at the time when this game was released spoiled it for me. So me knowing what happened in the story kind of like killed my momentum, especially because I'm someone that's very narrative focused with their games. So it kind of kills like my excitement to play through it. But I am really enjoying the puzzles and the gameplay of this now. I mentioned in my Switch collection video that I was still trying to get used to the motion controls and using the joystick, and I've been like forcing myself to play more often. I'm so used to it now. I don't know, I'm really enjoying it. I'm even enjoying the motion controls. I feel like they still work better a little bit more in the Wii version. I don't know why. Please let me know if that is the case, but for you too. But I really like this version so far. I could go more in depth, but again, I want to really do a discussion video when I beat it. So maybe I'll do that down the road. Give me like a couple weeks or something. Now, Link's Awakening is a game that I played originally on the Game Boy. I don't know if it was color or just regular Game Boy, but I played on my Game Boy Advance. It wasn't my copy, so you know, it wasn't something I can keep, and it's not something that's part of my collection, but I ended up just picking up the Switch version. Again, I haven't gone through it, just because I'm still going through Skyward Sword at the moment, but I remember having very fond memories of the Game Boy original. This is probably like one of the saddest Zelda games you could possibly play. I'm excited to play through it though. I've seen that they've taken the time to like redo the music for a lot, and they've even added like animated cutscenes that are really cool, so I'm looking forward to playing this. Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity. I almost struggled to put this. I guess this is what is gonna be really just strictly considered a side game in the Zelda franchise. But it's so weird because it's a side game that has a lot of narrative for Breath of the Wild. And this is kind of something that interests me because I mentioned how I was disappointed in Breath of the Wild story. So I'm excited to play this, and I might play this at some point soon just to see like the story and like the different characters and everything. I hope this at least fixes story issues. I never got to play the original Hyrule Warriors because during the time I just couldn't afford it, and maybe that's something I'll try to collect in the future, whether it's for the 3DS, the Switch remake, or what have you. But Age of Calamity was something I just really wanted to get because, again, my biggest issue with Breath of the Wild was the story, and I hope this actually remedies that. I hope that this game can make that game a little bit better, and I would love that. So I'm gonna go through this when I can. I might, if I finish Skyward Sword, I might go through this next. If this is like short enough, if it's like a 30-hour, 40-hour plus game, probably gonna hold off. I like to play short games in between the long ones, if that makes sense, to kind of give myself some time to breathe a little bit before heading on to another long adventure. So yeah, I don't know, Age of Calamity. Now, I didn't want to go through the rest of the collection without mentioning this, that I did have the Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword Joy-Cons. I love these controllers, the way they look. I almost never want to use them because I mentioned that video as well that I'm worried about Joy-Con drift, and I don't want that to happen to these controllers, but I am trying to utilize them when I play Skyward Sword on the TV. I will use these controllers for motion controls to kind of enjoy that experience, but I can't give enough praise for these controllers. Even like the lanyards they decided to use were incredible. So yeah, I love them. So now that I've talked about the games, let's go ahead and talk about my figures that I actually got for it. You already saw the Twilight Princess, Wolf Link, and Midna figure, but there's so much more where that comes from. A lot of these figures are actually separate. They're not part of a collector's edition for the game. You have to actually go out of your way to try to find them. I'm gonna actually go through the amiibos first. The first one, I had to get it, the Toon Link one. This one came out for Smash, and you know this is something that I desperately looked for. There's another Toon Link one, and there's one with Zelda as well, that came out for the Zelda anniversary, and I really wish I got those at the time, because now they're so ridiculously expensive. They're like in the $60s to $100 for this. And my own biggest complaint with Amiibo is because they're so cheap, I guess that sometimes the paint jobs aren't always perfect, and sometimes they kind of rush some things and you can find some imperfections a lot of the time. But luckily the Toon Link one I have here looks almost flawless. Like, I cannot find imperfection on the one I have in particular. I love this amiibo. It's very cute. It's Toon Link. How am I not gonna like it? So yeah, Toon Link. Next is the Twilight Princess Smash amiibo as well. I got this during the time that Smash Wii U came out as well, and it's cool. I think the paint job on the face could be a little bit better on this one. I feel like one eye looks smaller than the other, but other than that, the shield and the sword itself has a wonderful paint job to it. I get worried about the, I guess, durability of this, especially the sword in particular, because it bends so easily, and I'm worried that it's going to come off his hand or something. And the paint job around his hand is not exactly stellar, because it looks like they got some of the Master Sword purple on his like glove or something, but whatever. It is what it is. It's still a good looking amiibo, to be honest with you, but it's just not one of the best ones. Now this is something that's still in the box, and I don't want to unbox it because, I don't know, I just like the way it looks. It's the Zelda and Loftwing from Skyward Sword amiibo. I don't feel like I need to use the gameplay function that's for this, where you can kind of fly at any time. Maybe I'll feel differently when I get to a part of the game where I feel like I need to use the Loftwing. But I don't know, just the idea of having to like always reach for my amiibo when I want to fly to a different location in Skyward Sword seems kind of annoying. I don't want to have to take this around everywhere I go just so I can do that one little action in the game. But so that's why I'm leaving it in the box. But I really love this figure so much. The design, the paint job was stellar, and the time it must have taken to actually make this Loftwing is pretty fantastic. This is probably like my favorite version of Zelda that I've seen so far. So the next stuff in my collection is actually probably like my favorite figures that I have. I love Nendroids. It's like a weird mix between Pop and Play Arts Kai. It's like the style, like the quality of a Play Arts Kai figure with say the cuteness of a Pop figure, I guess. Let's go ahead and talk about the first one I ended up getting, and you guys know it. It's the Legend of Zelda Wind Waker Nendroid. This one is so cute, has so many great different expressions for it, and I love Toon Link to death. Again, his design is probably like my favorite out of all the Links. He's the most expressive, and he's the cutest Link, and he's so strong and he's so brave, and I just love that about him. I really like it. I don't know what else to say. Just very cute. Majora's Mask 3D. Now this one is the last Nendroid I was like actually able to get, but it's actually really, the reason why this was so hard for me to get is because I didn't get it when it released, and then the price of this went up to a ridiculous degree, and I kind of waited on Amazon for the price to fall. Eventually it fell to like very close to like the original price, like so I ended up getting it while I could, and now the price is back up for these, so that's kind of unfortunate. And it comes with a lot of cute masks that Link can actually put over his face. You can't change him to Goron Link or Deku Link or anything like that, but the masks that you get are super cool. They're very well designed. There's so much nice detail on them. The sword that they give you as well, with the facial, the changes in the face and the bunny ears. It's just a very cute Nendoroid. Again, like, I love these because they're cute, but they can be so expressive, and you can kind of customize it to the way that you envision the character to be. So that's my favorite thing about this Majora's Mask version of Link, is just that you can kind of change him to like whatever expression you feel like you would normally think throughout the game, but you can also like have fun. Now this is probably the most detailed Nendroid that I have, and it is the Breath of the Wild Nendroid. I think this is the deluxe edition that comes with a horse. I won't say Epona, because I mean, in order to unlock Epona in that game, unfortunately you have to have a certain amiibo. which I don't have, I don't believe. So this version is really cool. It comes with a lot of cool stuff, cooking stuff, swords, a bow, hooded Link, the horse itself, the Sheikah slate, a lot of cool stuff in this. It doesn't come with the iconic Master Sword, unfortunately, but it comes with a lot of cool, like, little ligaments to pose him and everything. The reason why I believe it's a deluxe edition is because of the horse that it comes with. Regardless, this is probably honestly my second favorite design of Link, just because I love how different it is. I love Toon Link and he's still my favorite design, but if I had to choose a second favorite, this Breath of the Wild design of Link is really sick. I love it, and I'm so glad they kept true to it. And I love that he doesn't have to necessarily wear the green garb as well. He looks so cool, I guess, in this new blue garb that he's wearing, and they even have like the Sheikah arrow, which is so sick. I don't know how much I can talk about these androids, to be honest with you, because it's like every time I talk about them, it's like, it's cute, comes with so much stuff, it's so many expressions. It's like I'm saying the same thing over and over again, but I don't know, I just love them. I wish I can have more, and I think my biggest disappointment is that they haven't made a Twilight Princess one yet, or a Link to the Past, Link Between Worlds one yet. I hope they make them eventually, because I love those designs of Link too. Get on it, good smile. I don't know what else to tell you. I really want to see it. And now the big boy on the list. Oh my gosh, my Wii U. This is, even though I was disappointed in the Wii U as a console, if there's one good saving grace for it, it's this collector's edition. You guys know that the Legend of Zelda Wind Waker, I mentioned it so many times in this video, is one of my favorite games of all time. So when this came out, it was a no-brainer to get it. I remember actually, it was in high school when I got this, and I only had about $300 to spend, or $350, I believe. I had just enough to buy this, whatever price it was at the time. And even though the Wii U is like a very poor selling console, this is one of those games I ended up buying as a kid. I spent all my money on it, but luckily, you know, there were digital games that I ended up getting on this on this Wii U. Controller is my favorite aspect of this collector's edition for sure. What really makes this collector's edition worth it is that it comes with a digital copy of the Wind Waker, and that it also comes with a really beautiful gamepad. And it's a beautiful gamepad design. I almost never want to use it because of how great it looks. Even though I don't love the Wii U, I love this console. This particular console, not the Wii U console itself, but just this particular version of the Wii U, because that gamepad just looked so gorgeous, and it was, you know, a special edition of my one of my favorite games of all time. It reminded me of my first console that I got as a kid, the GameCube. I got it for Smash and Wind Waker, and those were the games I ended up playing the most on the Wii U as well, which is funny to think about now. It's such a wonderful special edition console, and even came with like a digital version of the Hyrule Historia. I did have a physical version of the Hyrule Historia, but unfortunately one of the times I moved, it actually got destroyed, so that's not something that I have anymore at this point. Makes me a little sad, but at least I got this digital version to like kind of go through. I gotta plug in my Wii U to do it, but hey, you know what, I get to see it in HD on my TV, so that's kind of cool. So yeah, I guess that this video came full circle in a very strange way. This particular unit, you know, that I have in front of me, it means a lot to me. It was the first time I spent my own hard-earned money as a kid on a console. Every other time, like, you know, my parents would buy it, and then this is the first time I bought my own, and then past that, you know, I bought everything myself. It means a lot, you know. It's just one of those games that it's always gonna mean, the Zelda series in itself is gonna mean a lot to me. It's given me inspiration. It's given me hope in a lot of ways, like especially during like a lot of dark times during my childhood. It gave me like an escape. Nowadays I kind of find it hard to escape in video games, especially as I get older, because I feel like there's so many other things I could do with my time, and I feel really guilty, and I still make time for them because I feel like, especially if they're narrative driven games, I feel like I can get something from it. Even though I don't have time to play games as much as I want to, it means a lot to me, and I feel like a lot of it started with the Zelda series. Sorry to get deep on you towards the end of this video. I just want to talk to you guys about that a little bit. That all being said, take care guys. I'm gonna make another one of these videos as soon as I can. Just keep in mind, I've had a lot of time to do these recently, so it might be like a week or two before the next one. The next one's gonna be really big, and I have so many things to say about it. I guess that's gonna be it for this one. I hope you guys enjoyed this this collection video. It really means a lot to me that you stuck it all the way towards the end and stayed around, heard my story. So take care, guys.